My name is Kara Lorne, and last night my mom called me crying so hard she could barely breathe. All she said was, "Who is the extra person in our photo?" I asked her what she meant, because we only took a picture of the three of us. Then she whispered, "Count again." When I opened the photo and looked closely, the extra person wasn't blurred or hidden. The person was standing behind me, turned toward the camera, staring straight at me. Before we go any further, make sure you subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. Earlier that day, everything felt normal. I had gone to visit my mom, May, at her house, so we could have a simple backyard lunch. The sun was warm, the air felt light, and my younger brother Jonas kept joking around while spraying the garden hose at the flowers my mom had just planted. She was laughing, fussing over her plants, and telling me how proud she was of how the garden was finally growing. My childhood friend Avery stopped by too, and she offered to take a few group photos of us near the new rose bushes, because my mom wanted fresh pictures to hang in the living room. We stood close together, smiling in the bright afternoon light, while Avery snapped a few shots with her phone. It felt like an easy, peaceful family moment. When I drove home later, I felt good. I sent the photos to my mom from my kitchen while I cooked dinner, thinking she would just text back a heart emoji or say she loved them. Instead, my phone rang with her name flashing on the screen. The moment I answered, I heard her crying so hard I could barely understand her. She kept repeating, "Kara, who is that person in the picture?" At first I thought she was confused or misunderstanding the photo, but when she choked out, "Count again," something inside me tightened. I opened the photo on my phone, zoomed in, and felt a cold rush through my chest as I realized she wasn't imagining anything. Someone else was in the picture with us. Someone none of us had seen while we were smiling for the camera. The moment I saw the extra person in the photo, a heavy chill moved through my whole body. I stared at the screen, hoping my eyes were wrong, but the figure stood clearly between me and Jonas, positioned just a step behind us like they belonged there. The more I zoomed in, the more real it became. The person was not a blur, not a shadow, not a trick of the light. They had a full, solid face turned directly toward the camera, while all of us were angled slightly forward. Their eyes were open, dark and fixed straight ahead in a way that made my stomach tighten. My first thought was that it had to be some kind of glitch or reflection, but nothing about it looked artificial. The edges of the figure were crisp. The sunlight hit their clothing the same way it hit ours. Even the direction of the shadow under their jaw matched the lighting of the backyard. I felt frozen as I studied their face. They looked young, maybe in their 20s, but their expression held no emotion. It was like they were waiting for something, or watching something I couldn't see. I forced myself to breathe and called out to my mom through the phone, telling her I saw it too. She began crying harder, saying she had checked every door in the house twice and felt like someone was inside with her. I told her to stay in the living room with the lights on while I called Jonas. When Jonas picked up, he sounded annoyed at first because he thought I was overreacting. But when I told him to look at the picture again and describe everyone he saw, his voice changed completely. He counted out loud, "You, me, Mom, and..." His voice cut off, and he whispered, "No way. No way I missed that." I asked him if anyone had been behind us during the photo. He said he was sure no one had walked into the yard, and he had been facing the gate the entire time. He said, "If someone stepped in, I would have seen it." His silence stretched for several seconds before he asked me if I was driving home. I told him no. I was still in my kitchen staring at the photo like it held the answer to something bigger. He told me not to leave my place and said he would check the entire house again while keeping Mom on the couch. I heard him moving fast through the rooms, opening doors and checking behind curtains. The intensity in his voice shook me. Jonas was the calm one in our family, and hearing fear in his voice made everything feel worse. After hanging up with Jonas, I opened the other photos from earlier that day. In the first one, the figure was not there. It was just the three of us smiling. In the second, everything still looked normal. But in the third, the extra person appeared again in the exact same spot, with the exact same expression. It was almost like the figure had only chosen specific moments to appear. My chest tightened as I flipped between the photos. There was no sign of movement or approach. The person was simply there 1 second and gone the next. I tried to remember everything about the afternoon. The sound of birds, Avery's laugh, the warm sunlight, the way Mom brushed dirt off her hands after checking a plant. Nothing unusual stood out. At no moment did I sense someone behind me or hear a step in the grass. The yard had been quiet, almost too quiet in hindsight. My anxiety grew stronger the longer I studied the image. The figure's clothing bothered me too. The shirt was far too plain, not matching any style I normally saw. It was light gray with no logos and no wrinkles, almost like it didn't belong in the same bright outdoor setting. The hair was short and even, like a bad haircut someone did in a hurry. The face looked off in a way I couldn't describe. Not distorted, not unnatural, but unsettling in its stillness. I felt a cold pressure on my chest and kept wiping my palms on my jeans as if I had touched something cold. My phone buzzed again, and it was Mom sending another message. She said she kept hearing a soft creak in the hallway, like someone shifting their weight. She was too scared to check. I called her back right away, telling her to stay in the living room and keep the house lights on. She said, "Kara, I swear someone is watching the doorway." I felt my heart drop, because I realized this photo was not just a weird glitch. Whatever showed up behind us felt connected to the house, to the yard, to something close enough to touch us. I told Mom and Jonas to stay together until I got there. For the first time in my life, the photo in my hand felt like evidence, and the fear I felt pushed me into action. I grabbed my keys with shaking hands, because now I needed to know exactly who that person was and how they ended up standing behind us without any of us noticing. As soon as I hung up the phone with my mom and Jonas, I grabbed my keys with unsteady hands and headed toward the door, feeling the weight of the situation closing around me. I had never driven to my mother's house at night with this level of urgency before, but I knew staying home would only leave me imagining the worst. As I stepped outside, the quiet of my apartment complex felt too sharp, like every sound carried a warning. I locked my door, double-checked it without thinking, and walked to my car with my heart beating fast enough to echo in my ears. The moment I started driving, my thoughts raced faster than the streetlights passing above me. I kept replaying the image of the extra person in the photo, trying to make sense of the way they appeared so close to me and Jonas, without either of us noticing. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of prank, but every logical explanation crumbled each time I remembered the blank stillness of the figure's face. I tried calling Avery to ask her if she remembered noticing anything strange while taking the photos. She answered on the second ring, sounding confused and slightly worried. When I explained what my mom saw and what I found in the photo, she gasped and said she had not noticed anyone at all during the shoot. She described how she was focused on framing the shot, adjusting brightness, and making sure we looked centered. She said, "If someone walked into the yard, I would have noticed, Kara. I was standing right there." Her certainty only deepened the confusion in my chest. I asked her to drive to my mom's house too, because I wanted her to look at the photos again with us in person. She agreed immediately and said she would leave right away. When I turned into my mother's neighborhood, the streetlights cast long shadows across the empty sidewalks. The houses looked peaceful, but my fear made everything feel slightly off, like the world had shifted in a way I could not see yet. I parked in the driveway and hurried up the front steps. Before I could knock, Jonas pulled the door open with a tense expression. He said he had checked every room twice, but the hallway still felt cold, and he kept hearing faint movements even when he was sure no one else was inside. As I stepped in, the air of the living room felt unusually still. My mom sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, clutching her phone with both hands. When she saw me, she stood up quickly and hugged me tight, her shoulders shaking slightly. She whispered, "I keep thinking the person in that photo was standing right here with us." I held her for a moment and told her I was here now, and we were going to figure it out together. Once she calmed a little, she brought out the printed photo she had made earlier. Seeing it on paper made it even more unsettling. The extra person stood between me and Jonas, but on the print, the details of their face were even sharper. I could see the subtle tilt of their head, the faint outline of their hairline, and the slight tension in their jaw. There was nothing ghostly or unclear about the figure. They looked like a real human being who had stood close enough to touch us. Jonas pointed at the figure's shadow and said, "Look, their shadow is going the wrong way." He held the picture up to the lamp, and he was right. The sunlight in the photo cast shadows to the right, but the figure's shadow fell slightly forward. That detail made the fear twist deeper inside me. Something about this person did not follow the ordinary rules of light or movement. A few minutes later, Avery arrived. She came in holding her camera bag and her phone, her expression stiff with concern. She asked to see the printed photo, and when she looked at it, the color drained from her face. She whispered, "This makes no sense. I took 3 photos in a row, and I swear I didn't see anything behind you." She unlocked her phone and opened her camera roll, handing the device to Jonas so he could scroll through the photos. We examined each image again. In the first, there were only the 3 of us. In the second, still just us. But in the third, the figure appeared as if they had always been there. Avery pointed out something we all missed. In the corner of the first photo, the leaves of the backyard bushes were pushed forward slightly, as if someone had brushed through them. In the second photo, the bushes were still again. And in the third, the figure stood fully formed behind us. The moment Avery said, "It looks like they moved right before the last shot," I felt a jolt go through me. That single detail changed everything. If the bushes moved before the photo was taken, then someone had been physically present, hiding just out of sight, waiting. My mom covered her mouth with her trembling hand. Jonas cursed under his breath and grabbed a flashlight from the drawer. He said he wanted to check the backyard again, and I agreed. Standing still and doing nothing was no longer an option. Something was happening on my mom's property, and we needed to confront it. The fear that had been pushing us down now pushed us forward, and for the first time that night, I felt myself shift from terrified to determined. We had to find out who that person was, and why they appeared in our family photo. Jonas grabbed 2 flashlights from the kitchen drawer, while Avery checked the batteries in hers, and I stood in the living room, trying to steady my breathing, as my mom clung to the edge of her blanket. I told her to stay inside with the doors locked while we checked the backyard. She nodded, but the fear in her eyes told me she hated being separated from us, even for a moment. We stepped out into the cool night air, and the quiet hit me right away. The backyard, which felt cheerful and bright earlier that afternoon, now seemed sharp and unfamiliar under the porch light. The garden felt tense, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Jonas walked ahead toward the rose bushes where we had taken the photos, shining his flashlight along the fence line. Avery stayed close to me, gripping her own light tightly. As we reached the patch of grass where we had stood for the picture, Jonas stopped abruptly and said, "Look at this." His light illuminated the soil near the side fence where the bushes met the ground. There was a single shoe print pressed deep into the dirt. It was larger than mine, larger than Jonas's, and fresh enough that the edges hadn't shifted or softened. The shape was clear, angled slightly toward the exact spot where we had posed earlier. My pulse quickened as I stared at it. That print hadn't been there during the afternoon. Someone had stood in that spot recently, close enough to reach out and touch us while we smiled at the camera. Avery slowly raised her flashlight to the bushes, and I followed her beam with my eyes. The branches still held a few snapped leaves, as if something had pushed through earlier. I crouched down and traced the broken branches with my fingertips. They felt newly torn, the inside of the stems still soft. My breath caught as I whispered, "They were hiding here." Jonas angled his light along a narrow trail of disturbed grass leading toward the back gate. The gate stood slightly open, even though my mother always kept it shut and latched. The metal lock hung loosely, not broken, but pulled in a way that suggested someone had forced it without damaging it. Jonas stepped forward and pushed the gate open slowly, the hinges giving a faint groan. Beyond the gate, the alley behind our house stretched into darkness, lined with other fences and trash bins. It was empty now, but the stillness made my skin crawl. Jonas aimed his light at the ground just outside the fence. More prints dotted the dirt, scattered as if someone had been standing there, watching the yard, waiting for the right moment. A piece of torn fabric caught my eye near the bottom of the gate. I leaned down and picked it up. It was a small strip of dark jacket material, frayed along the edges, caught on a splinter of wood. It felt like a signature left behind, proof that someone wasn't a hallucination or camera glitch, but a real person who moved through the yard without being seen. Avery stepped beside me and whispered, "This is not random, Kara." The seriousness in her voice made my chest tighten. Jonas continued down the alley a little further, shining his light behind bins and along fences. He suddenly called out, "Kara, Avery, come here." We rushed to him and saw tracks leading toward the far end of the alley. They stopped beneath a tree where the shadows thickened. Beyond that, the trail vanished, swallowed by the darkness. I felt a sinking feeling settle into my stomach. Whoever the person was, they had gotten close enough to watch us and slip away without a trace. Before we could decide what to do next, my phone buzzed loudly in my pocket, making me jump. I pulled it out, thinking it was my mom checking on us, but the caller ID showed an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, unsure if I wanted to hear whatever might be waiting on the other end. When I finally pressed accept, there was a moment of silence. Not static, not background noise, just complete emptiness. I said hello twice, my voice trembling slightly. The line stayed quiet for another beat, and then the call ended. I looked at Jonas and Avery, both watching me closely. My phone buzzed again immediately, this time with a message. A single image appeared on the screen. It was the same backyard photo we had been studying, but this version was different. The perspective was taken from behind us. It showed me, Jonas, and my mom's garden from the angle of the person hiding in the bushes. The figure who appeared in the original photo was missing in this one, as if they were the one taking it. My breath caught in my throat. Someone had been close enough to photograph us from behind, while Avery stood in front of us taking the group shot. Avery stepped closer and whispered, "Kara, that angle is from inside the bushes. They were right behind you." My hands shook as I stared at the image. The idea that someone had been hidden behind us, photographing us while we smiled unaware, sent a wave of nausea through me. If they were there when the picture was taken, then they must have slipped out the moment Avery lowered her phone. Jonas exhaled sharply and said we needed to call the police immediately. But before he could dial, my phone buzzed once more. Another photo came through. This time it showed the side of the house, taken from the alley right before the sun set. In the very corner of the frame, half hidden behind the fence, was the faint outline of a person's shoulder and head. They were watching the house like they were waiting for the right moment to step forward again. The sight of it made my entire body tense with fear. I knew then that this wasn't over. Whatever this person wanted, they had no intention of staying hidden for long. When we finally went back inside the house, the three of us felt shaken in a way none of us could quite put into words. My mom was still sitting on the couch with the blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders, watching us with wide, worried eyes. The moment she saw me, she stood up and asked if we found anything, and I could only nod slowly as I handed her the torn piece of fabric from the gate. Her hands trembled as she held it. She whispered that she had lived in this house for 20 years and never once felt frightened in her own backyard until today. I placed the fabric on the table and told her everything we discovered outside, the shoe prints, the disturbed bushes, the open gate, and the photos sent to my phone. Every detail made her expression grow more troubled, and she kept looking around the room as if she expected someone to appear in the hallway at any moment. I could feel how badly she wanted reassurance, but the truth was that I didn't have anything comforting to offer yet. Jonas shut all the curtains and checked every lock, while Avery paced the living room, holding her phone tightly like she was bracing for another message. I kept thinking about the photos, especially the one taken from inside the bushes. The idea that someone stood behind us while we were laughing and posing in the sunlight made my stomach twist. It felt like an invasion, not just of privacy, but of something deeper, something personal. A few minutes later, the police arrived after Jonas called them. 2 officers came inside and listened carefully as we explained everything from the beginning. We showed them the printed photo, the torn fabric, and the tracks outside. I could see the officers exchange a serious glance when they saw the images from my phone. One of them said the angle strongly suggested someone had been hiding near the fence. They asked my mom if she remembered hearing anything unusual during the afternoon. She shook her head and admitted that the yard had been quieter than usual, but she blamed it on the heat. The officers walked through the house, checking windows, closets, and the basement, making sure no one had slipped inside. When they finished, they told us they believed someone had trespassed, and they would increase patrols around the neighborhood for the next few nights. They advised us to keep lights on, lock every entry point, and report anything strange immediately. Their calm instructions helped stabilize the fear in the room, but they also confirmed what we had been trying not to say out loud. This was real, and someone had been watching us. After the officers left, we all gathered in the living room again. My mom sat between Jonas and me, leaning her head lightly against my shoulder. She said she never wanted to see that photo again, but she also refused to throw it away because she wanted to remember how close we had been to danger without realizing it. Avery offered to stay the night in case my mom needed extra support. She said she didn't want to drive home alone yet, and the idea of leaving any of us alone felt wrong. I agreed, and Jonas brought out extra blankets and pillows. For a moment, the house felt almost normal again, as we busied ourselves preparing the living room for a long night. Yet, beneath the small comforts, the weight of what happened hung heavily over us. I kept looking toward the windows, imagining someone standing outside, waiting for another chance to appear in a photo, or worse, to step inside. Later that night, after my mom fell asleep on the couch, Jonas sat beside me on the floor and asked quietly if I thought the person in the photo had followed us, or if they had been hiding in the yard long before. I told him I didn't know yet, but the fact that the person appeared so clearly in one picture and not in the others made me believe they were moving around us without being noticed. Jonas rubbed his hands over his face and said he couldn't stop thinking about the shadow direction being wrong. Something about that detail made everything feel even more disturbing. Avery sat on the rug across from us, staring at her phone with a tense expression. She finally said, "I keep wondering if the person we saw in the photo is the same one who took the pictures they sent you." I said I thought so, but I couldn't understand their motive. Whoever this was, they wanted us to know they were close. They wanted us to feel watched. That thought sank into my chest like a stone. Around midnight, I stepped into the hallway to get some water. The rest of the house felt silent and still. As I walked back toward the living room, my phone buzzed again in my pocket. My heart jumped. I pulled it out, expecting another anonymous photo. Instead, it was a new number with a short message. "I was there today." I froze. My hands tightened around the phone. The message didn't sound threatening, but it was unmistakably personal. I swallowed hard and showed it to Jonas and Avery. Jonas grabbed his jacket, saying he wanted to check the backyard again, but I stopped him. I realized something important in that moment. The person wanted us to look for them. They wanted us to chase shadows. And the more attention we gave them, the tighter their grip became. I locked the front door again, this time with a firm calmness. I told Jonas we were calling the officers back in the morning. I told Avery and my mom we would stay together and take shifts, sleeping if needed. I decided that fear wasn't going to control this house. Whatever this person wanted, we were not going to make it easy for them. And if you want more stories like this, make sure you subscribe to my channel and comment where you are watching from.